Good evening, dear ladies and gentlemen. We are delighted to welcome you all to the thought-provoking evening talk organized by Water Forum of IESL. Hope I'm audible. This is another event that is organized with the timely topic as a part of the monthly event organized by Water Forum in the field of water and sanitation. Water is one of the basic resources for human life. A man can live without food for a few days, but not without water. As per the water scarcity clock, as of today, nearly 2.4 billion people around the world living in the water scarce area. The climate change and the increased water pollution pose serious threats for the future. In order to talk broad in this area, today we have brought down a very prominent engineer in this field to share his knowledge and experience with the audience. And the topic for the day is Leave No One Behind. The speaker today is none other than Engineer Anand Jayaveer. He is a water and hygiene specialist who provides technical support to national and international agencies. Also, he is a Sustainable Development Goal number 6 monitoring champion appointed by Sanitation and Water for All, United Nations hosted global multi-stakeholder partnership. He is a product of Dharmaraja College, Kandy. He has been supporting IESL Water Forum in various ways since its inception. Before inviting the speaker to commence his oration, I would like to inform you all about the agenda. Next, Engineer Anand Jayaveer will deliver his speech and it will be followed with question and answer session. Audience can post their questions via chat box while the speech is in progress. It will be taken at the end of the session. Q&A session will be moderated by Engineer Rajkumar, who doesn't require any introduction. However, it's my duty to introduce him to the audience. He has obtained his first degree from University of Peradeniya. In his career path, he has held various positions in National Water Supply and Drainage Board and currently serving as an additional general manager, which is the second level apex position in the organization. He is a fellow member of IESL, having master's degree in engineering from Denmark and University of Moratuwa, and an MBA from Postgraduate Institute of Management, University of Sri Jayewardenepura. He is also an active member of IESL Water Forum. Without further ado, I would like to kindly invite Engineer Anand Jayaveer to take over this virtual platform. Now, we are excited to listen how to go without leaving no one behind. Sir, screen is yours.
Thank you, Sri. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I think we are now having a very difficult time without power. In fact, I am in the dark. Anyway, I'll try my best to entice you with my presentation. I'll now upload the. So I hope everybody can see now.
Yes, sir.
Is it? Unfortunately,
yes,
I can't show myself to you because I am in the dark. And I have a small torch that gives me the little bit of light. Anyway, our topic today is leave no one behind to no one left behind. Leave no one behind is that that is to achieve universal access to water and sanitation. You cannot leave anybody behind. Because in single, if you say in singular, it is किसी पे को अत्याचार नोयान यानी समटम जलेसा सनीपारक्षा. So it is the It is an adaptation of the central promise of the
So excuse
2030
me.
Agenda for Sustainable Development.
So it's
This is an adaptation of the central promise of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which is called Sustainable Development. As sustainable development must progress, everyone must benefit. So the next slide, the challenges to achieve universal access. I think we know very well that we transformation from MDG to SDG. Now, 2015, MDG process was ended and it expired by the end of 2015. Then SDG was introduced and 2016 was the base year. Then they identified 17 goals and 169 targets. Now, for these targets, now if I explain to you, goal 6 has 8 targets. That is 6.1 up to 6.8. Next slide. So 17 goals are divided into 3 main categories and areas of goals. The first 1 to 6 are based on human rights and basic rights. 7 to 12 is about economic development and well-being. Economic infrastructure, industrialization, cities, livable, sustainable consumption and production. Now, 13 to 17, there are 5 goals which are actually focused on protecting the earth, planet. So now today's focus is actually 1 to 6, mainly on focus on water sanitation. Now we know number 1 is end poverty. That is a basic right of the people to have adequate food and nutrition required for growth and development. The number 2 is end hunger, ensure food security. Health and well-being, education for all, achieve gender equality, water and sanitation. Next slide. Now this central transformative promise of the 2030 is based on 3 important universal values. Those are human rights-based approach and leaving no one behind, gender equality and women's empowerment. So these are the 3 universal values. The SDGs are based on these 3 universal values. Now, what is human right-based approach? That is alignment with international norms and standards. We are part of the United Nations and we have signed treaties, agreements, commitments. We have made commitments to sustainable development goals. Likewise, alignment with number of international norms and standards agreements. Leaving no one behind, that is equity and no discrimination. Everybody has equal rights in terms of access to water and sanitation. We don't discriminate. Then the gender equality and women's empowerment. Active and meaningful participation of gender. Robust accountability mechanism. So these are actually very inspiring statements which we require to learn and put it into our systems. Next one, please. Yeah, now this is the crux of the matter. Sustainable Development Goal 6, Target 6.1, 6.2. In 2016, we say, leave no one behind. That is the commitment. But in 2030, we should be able to say, no one left behind. That is the achievement. You understand, no? Now, that is the universal coverage. Now we have people who has left behind in terms of provision of services and various human right allocations and things like that. So this is the way that we are way forward for us, and this is the vision. Thank you. Next one. So what are the issues affecting leave no one behind? Why we say leave no one behind? Because of these 5 areas of social issues, which are discrimination, how people are affected due to discrimination, unjust treatment, race, age, sex, or disability. No, we know very well. We are only recently we have introduced these aspects into our infrastructure and also social service system that recognize disabled people, disabled friendly infrastructure, buildings, and built environment. But that is up to all these years we haven't focused on these things. Now we know that is discrimination. So in geographical, what are the geographical issues that affect people? Because some people live in isolation, in hard to reach areas. It is very difficult terrain. Sometimes people live. Now, in Sri Lanka, particularly, we have a central region which is very hard to reach areas are there. So isolation in hard to reach areas, out of reach of the government delivery system. So most of the government delivery system based on very high investments, they don't go to those areas because those are not affordable to those people living in that hard, in difficult terrain. Then the governance issue. Governance issues are mainly apathy, lack of interest, and low priority. Sometimes, lucky, no power has come, just a minute. Power has come back at least now. Anyway, we continue. Now, governance issues, apathy, lack of interest, and low priority. Apathy means nobody cares about the downtrodden. They are just. So governance. Now I have put now very interesting phrases for governance. You can now experience inconsistent, incompetent, and incapable, even including illiterate government. 4I, within bracket 4I. Like 4G, it is 4I. So socio-economic status, educational attainment, life expectancy, affordability, poverty. These are only briefly, I have put down these things. Socio-economic status, it's a broad subject. So part of that also plays a role in getting the services. So vulnerabilities, shocks, emergencies, climate change impacts, emergencies, violence, conflict, and displacement. So those people are actually left behind sometimes. Next slide. So Sustainable Development Goal 6 is crystal clear. Water for all by 2030. By definition, this means leaving no one behind. But today, billions of people are still living without safe water. Now here in Sri Lanka, at least 30%, say at least 10% are still living without safe water, not even improved water. So we should know what is safe water and improved water. I'll try to explain it. But today, millions of people are still living without safe water. There are households, schools, workplaces, farms, and factories struggling to survive and thrive. So marginalized groups, women, children, refugees, indigenous people, disabled people, and many others are often overlooked and sometimes face discrimination as they try to access and manage the safe water they need. Now we can bring examples from Sri Lanka, a number of examples. You can always compare the plantation community in the states and also the north and east people who are not really brought up to the standard that we are enjoying in other parts of the country, that I have to say that without any fear. So let us go to the next slide. What are the rights and what do they mean? The UN declared these rights in 2000, I think 11 or 10 maybe. The right to water entitles everyone to have access to sufficient, safe, acceptable, physically accessible, and affordable water for personal and domestic use. At least every person must have 120 liters per day per person for drinking and cooking, hygiene and washing. We account, I think, 20 to 40 liters for drinking and cooking. So balance is for hygiene and other sanitation services. So sanitation is the right to sanitation, entitles everyone to have physical and affordable access to sanitation in all spheres of life that is safe, hygiene, secure, and socially and culturally acceptable, and that provides privacy and ensures dignity. So these things are the universal statements which are applicable everywhere. Now, you may be having a nice toilet, nice sanitation systems in your house, but if your neighbor is not having a proper sanitation, you won't be healthy because you are always vulnerable to catch diseases because of the environment. So let's go to the next slide. So what we need is to create an enabling environment for IWRM to address all aspects of water and cater for all users of water. National Drinking Water Policy is one of the more instrument and building blocks for enabling environment and human rights to drinking water. That's a policy, and it's also, it should be reflected in the constitution. Improve water use efficiency in other sectors. Now, drinking water shortage may occur if other sectors use water which are really over the limit of their requirement. But they must improve efficiency and save water for drinking, because we know that drinking water is vulnerable. But it can vary, it can affect due to the climate change, due to weather, due to environmental issues, droughts. All those things can affect drinking water availability. So priority water use we have to establish as a national policy. So this is how we need to ensure that drinking water safety and security. Safety means the standard quality. Security means required quantity. That water security, ensure water security means ensure the quantity of water available at all times. Ensure safety means ensure that the water supplied is drinking water quality standard. Next one. I think Sri Lanka signed, Sri Lanka made a commitment and agree on a national human rights action plan. Sometime ago, I think it was signed in 2014, if I remember, then we have laid down very important commitments in terms of establishing human rights to water and sanitation. So I have put the numbers according to the Human Rights Action Plan. So the 3.1.1 is the action to review and consider the right to water and sanitation as recognized in international conventions. So that is one of the tasks that was given to our sector. So process is now these two right-hand columns we have agreed in a meeting in the ministry in 2018. Create enabling environment for national targets to achieve universal access to water and sanitation by 2030. So policy statement is ensure water safety and security. That is the policy. So amend the fundamental rights chapter of the Constitution to include right to water and sanitation. That is the 3.1.2 section of the NHRAP. So this has to go into new constitution. So I invite the current, say, those who are now working in the government sector to look into this and see that these are incorporated into the new country's constitution. Number 3.1.3, harmonize all legislative policy and regulatory provisions to recognize and implement a minimum standard of access to water for both personal and domestic use. So nationally agree minimum standard and benchmark and review all policies and regulatory provisions. Adopt minimum standards and access in line with SDGs, target 6.1, 6.2. Now we need to agree. We know that we can't provide water for 24 hours. I know now Mr. Premanath is also in the audience. Now he would know how many out of 350 water supply schemes, how many are supplying 24-hour water supply? That is the question. That is the reality. So the 3.1.4 articulates clear policy statement and plan of action to implement access to improved sanitation as a matter of priority among vulnerable groups. I think it is already in place. Targeting safely managed sanitation is our target. Next one. Global facts, just want to present. I think I don't need to go through. There are 2.1 million people lack access to safely managed sanitation, safely managed drinking water. Water is the diminishing resource. That is what I have put down in red. 3.5 billion people lack safely managed sanitation services. So that is a threat to health and water, availability of water, clean water. Water scarcity and already affects 4 out of every 10 people. 90% of all natural disasters are water related. Climate change and hydrometeorological disasters, HMD is 80% of wastewater flows back into the ecosystem without being treated or reused. Threat to freshwater ecosystems and water availability. So each one of the issues and how it is effective, if those issues are not resolved, how it is going to affect is put it in red. Right, the next one. Now this is how, when the SDGs was introduced, this is how the progressive realization of service levels from the bottom to top, from lowest level to safely managed. And water also we go climb the ladder up to safely managed. Sanitation we climb the ladder to safely managed. Hand washing we climb the ladder and provide basic, at least basic. Fully plumbed is the safely managed. So these colors are also the color codes used by the international community. Right, next one. So this is how we interpret Sri Lankan present coverage in water sanitation in terms of safely managed water, accessibility, availability, and quality. Then safely managed sanitation, accessibility, availability, and quality. Next one. So this is the current coverage of these service levels. When you put it in one sheet, one frame, accessibility, availability, quality. At least we have now projected that 55% of the population are having piped water. Due to water board, about 45%, and due to rural water sector, about 10 to 11%. So this is how it goes. If there is only accessibility, it is unimproved limited supply. If there is accessibility, availability, it is called basic protected basic services. An example of that is protected well, tube well, which is actually outside premises. So you have accessibility and availability, but with pipe water, you meet that quality standard. So therefore, we called it safely managed. Now the ministry is trying to achieve 100% by 2025 with safely managed water. Right. Next one. What is our task? Targeting population. We are now looking at the population left behind. Reduce inequalities and leaving no one behind. Inequalities are there in plantation sector. Services are lagging behind compared to national average. People living in hard to reach areas. People living in hard terrain, rather the mountainous region in the central Sri Lanka. People living in difficult terrain in central region. People affected due to conflict. Still we are there. Indigenous people also threatened due to deforestation and encroachment of land, their land. People living under people living in underserved settlement. Underserved settlement still exist. Schools without water, sanitation, MHM. MHM means menstrual hygiene management. Now we focused on menstrual hygiene management about 10 years ago. And now the schools are provided with facilities for menstrual hygiene management and ensure that child, they attend school every day. Lack of water and sanitation during festivals and public conveniences. Still we have this problem. For example, Anuradhapura, Kandy, during Kandy Perahara, those then public places like bus terminals, railway stations, public conveniences are very poor, in very dilapidated condition. And also we need additional facilities for hand washing. We implemented additional facilities during pandemic, and we need to continue it as the threat of pandemic is not yet over. And also we need to ensure that infection prevention and control, we need hand washing at all times. Next. What are the equity and inclusion issues in hard to reach areas in Sri Lanka? As I said before, plantation and northern east, government delivery system has failed to reach out. Scattered population not feasible for major development. Now we know in this difficult terrain, there are a lot of people scattered, so you can't develop infrastructure to serve all the people. And it is not attractive for loan project means investments. To get a return, we know that very well. We have to give capital investment, capital cost in rural areas as a grant. Lack of reliable water sources for investment on new development. In these areas, it is very difficult to find water, but always you can find a hill stream, but some areas there are dry zones. Difficult terrain and high cost of development. Weakness in community organizations and advocacy. Central and local issues. Central and local issues mean in the central level we are the government focus on large scale development, but local level they have to receive funds from the central government through a budget. Then sometimes it is not very regular, therefore development is not continuous. Then environmental issues affecting rural water supplies. Rural water supply depends on natural water resources which are depending on the environmental quality. Environmental quality means watershed and protection of forest and prevention of pollution. So there are water conflicts due to multiple users and users. Water safety and security for informal sector is an issue because we cannot provide full treatment systems for certain areas where it is not feasible. Or the investment you can't recover. Right, next one. I think this is the golden era for WASH. Because of this pandemic, the importance of WASH is highlighted everywhere. So we have become very important people all over the world now. WASH is the first line of defense against infection, prevention and control and fight pandemics. Lack of water and sanitation and hygiene impact key health and social outcomes, even economy. Global priority is to reduce water poverty and build resilience. Because of lack of water, a lot of people are in poverty. That is, there is a index called Water Poverty Index. And we haven't developed that for over 15 years. Some time ago, we had an opportunity to do that. But we need to focus on that. I think present young generation must take up this research to establish this index, water poverty index. First priority is WASH to remove inequalities in society. Poverty increase due to pandemic and affordable solutions are important. Therefore, affordable pandemic. Due to pandemic, a lot of people lost livelihood. Therefore, their affordability is reduced. So they cannot afford the same services which they enjoyed before because they don't have money to pay now. Most of the priority intervention by donors in the water and sanitation sector after the pandemic, most of them invested in water and sanitation. Water is our most precious resource. It is now called blue gold. It is not only essential for survival and hygiene, but also plays a social and cultural role at the heart of human society. Sorry, the place has to come before social. There is a mix-up. Anyway, sorry about that. Maybe I have to blame the power cut. Next one. So these are the challenges I think I have already. Water is a casualty of unsustainable civilization and climate change. You know, climate change is first water is affected due to climate change. That is very well established. Recover the cost of unsustainable civilization. Now, our civilization in the past 150 years had been unsustainable. That's why we are suffering now. We don't have power now. And we don't have fuel, we cannot move. Mobility is also restricted. That is because it is not sustainable. Protect natural systems and the interest of the people who depend on the natural system. We need to protect the natural system in these hard to reach areas and safeguard interest of the people who depend on the natural system. Create the enabling environment for all to lead their lives based on their aspirations. This is the main statement that I am going to hop on. See, you should not give, say, handouts and try to satisfy people temporarily. But if you create an enabling environment for all to lead their lives based on their aspirations. Now we became engineers and we had aspirations to become engineers when we were small. So we somehow achieved that goal because we were not in the affected population in anyhow. So therefore we could do that. That is why creating the enabling environment. The next one is climate impact and affect social stability. Climate impacts affect social stability. Therefore, that is an emergency called emergency mainly caused by HMD. This term is something that we need to learn. Hydrometeorological disasters. Those are the floods, droughts, landslides, mainly for affecting Sri Lankan population. Next one. No, I will skip this one because it's next one. Now, this is something I photographed 3 weeks ago in Badul. Will this water flow in 30 years from now? That is a question I ask from you, not you. I had to ask from the people who exploit the natural resource base. Next one. Now see these 3 ladies carrying 2 cans of 20 liters on their head to their home from the source of water, but they don't have water services. So these are the people who live in hard to reach areas. So now we implement a project called Reaching the Unreached. So they are the people who has not been served by the government for how many years? I don't know, maybe. Now this is how they carry water. It is a real difficult job for women. And they are wasting time for water. They can't look after their families well in a day because they have to spend at least 2 hours to get water. Next one. Now see, when we were constructing small water supply schemes in these difficult areas, and we got the support of the community, and see how say middle-aged woman carrying construction material, and she is from the community-based organization. Next slide. Next slide. Yeah, these are the simple water treatment system that we provide. Now you can see how the terrain. So now once we hand over this to the community, they have to come to this place to operate and look after this. And that is a very difficult journey to come to this place. But anyway, we got the commitment from them at least to come at least once a month and see what is happening here. Okay, let us go to the next slide. Now, this is a good example of people who were displaced due to landslide in Valapani in 2007. This is how they were living for nearly 3 years. So this is Valapane in 2007. Now let's go to the next slide. This is how they were given the tents by UNHCR. And I was in UNICEF at that time, then I supported them with water and sanitation. The next slide. Now these people were resettled in Sandasiripura, Nuvareli district, Valapane division. They have been resettled, but still they don't have water. Water at home, you mean to the doorstep. So still we are discussing about the water source, availability of water source, and we are trying to dig a well, drill a well and give them water. They are still not having the, that is after how many years? They were settled in 2009, resettled. Since then, they were having hardships for more than 12 years. Next slide. This is a scene from a refugee camp. That was a long time ago, but I don't think we have these kind of scenarios now. Next one. Yeah, I want to go back to that Valapane displaced people. This is what the government did. The government assistance offered to these resettled families were limited to a land plot of 20%, 28 roofing sheets, and a financial grant of 50,000, which was released in 3 installments. So my comment on that is, the above assistance alone was not at all sufficient for these families to build their permanent houses with electricity, water, and sanitation. Next slide. So this is a small girl fetching water from a pipe that we installed in 2008 in Putlam. They were the displaced people from MENA. Just before we gave them a tap, they were still, we have just given the water connection. We were planning to give a stand post. Next slide. So these are some of the ferrocement tanks constructed for water scarce schools. There is a water scarcity in most of the schools is given to harvest rainwater and use for difficult drought season. Next slide. This is also one of the photos from Vaunia Manic Farm. Next one. This is how we gave the toilets for the refugees, the sanitation. Next slide. And bathing places. So the last message is that we need to create an enabling environment which is essential to create equal opportunities for all. Small handouts will never uplift the people affected. Hope you get the message. You give them the enabling, then they will know how to get things done. And we are restricted because of our maybe discrimination, whatever it is, because we don't have good foundation for rights-based approach. Thank you very much. Now I'll give this about 15 minutes time we have to answer any questions, but this is common sense what I have presented, nothing engineering in it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Anand Javira. It's good that you brought us a lot of information, especially driving us from the Millennium Development Goal to Sustainable Development Goal, and also giving us a clear insights into the 17, but focusing into the 6 main subject area of human rights. Now, when we were discussing about the equal opportunity, what it struck to me, being in the pipe-borne water sector, most of the viewers, I would say, will be having the water supply from the water board, enjoying a liter of water at the price of 12 cents. I wonder whether we'll be able to give the equality to everybody. And also, there was, I think, a very interesting point what mentioning that by 2030, we'll not be leaving anyone behind. I guess you may be in a position to tell us globally, how have they progressed? You know, as far as the Sri Lankan government is concerned, they are of the view that they are going to give water supply by 2025. But I wonder globally how it's going to be. So, and also I think you gave a very good message that all of us to come into and include this into the constitution as a human rights, and wanting all the engineers who are participating here to say that to identify this important one. But when you spoke about the blue gold, I would say that Sri Lanka is fortunate, identified when during the scarcity is going to have water. So I think I would like to pose a full question to you as what I asked you before. From the 2016 to 2030, there is a plan, but globally, are we on the correct track, or is there a lot more to go other than Sri Lanka? Over to Mr. Javira.
Yes, yeah, definitely. I don't think this goal could be achieved universally across the world, because this pandemic also is a big setback for most of the countries. They were lagging behind achieving this target because of the pandemic as well as resource constraints. So the UN, the UNICEF made an assessment of the investment required to fill this gap. It was $4 trillion. I think the JMP, there's a document. They say they have to raise some $4 trillion to meet these gaps. So, but these goals inspire the government. Now, without good governance, you cannot achieve these goals. So that's why the UN introduced these 17 goals, and the first 1 to 6 are based on human rights and basic rights. So at least we must focus all the international community on the basic right, human rights and basic rights. So that is the drive, that is the driving force, as well as it gives some inspiration to change our policies and change our say structure, institutional structure, and introduce new strategies. That is what they expect from these goals. So these goals are prepared by the international community, represented by Sri Lanka as well. But there were about 117 countries sent their expertise to prepare these goals. It was before 2015. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Javira. I think you are repeatedly mentioning about the pandemic and the benefits that arose. Now, what we have found is in year 2020, there was a sudden increase in drinking water requirement. But in 2021, the consumption level has not increased in proportion to the new connections. I think there is one message to all engineers that people had to be repeatedly reminded, because you are talking about asking a pictorial picture showing whether this water will be there. it's about deforestation that's taking place. I think we also have to be a better communicator to everybody that we know what we had been enjoying during our period, future generation. There's another question being posted as please explain how to contribute as engineers in WASH projects through UN agencies. I think you might be able to elaborate more on that.
Yeah, no, actually, Water Board, now UNICEF is working with Water Board. That is how they, UNICEF is the focal agency for water and sanitation. And they are mainly monitoring water and sanitation. So UN key agency is the UNICEF. So other international NGOs are there engaged in water sanitation now. Now, in fact, I am working for an international agency, NGO, implementing a project funded by EU. So we are promoting the international community to bring more funds. So whenever there is opportunity, I will share my information with you. But you also have to look into the opportunities to contribute to, especially the donors. Their main focus is to implement water and sanitation in rural areas where most of the people are lacking these facilities. Now, in the urban area, of course, we just have to wait. The water board does come and give us a connection, then we pay the bill. That is all. We don't have to worry about cutting the trench for the pipe, taking building materials to the site. All those things are not our business. But in the community managed system, we get them to do that because we don't have a lot of money to go and do everything from A to Z to have a very full-fledged, perfect system in those areas. Because that is the difference between rural and urban. Urban, we have an agreement with the water board. That is, we are paying the bill to the water board. So, but in rural areas, they themselves manage their own water. Here, water board manage the water and we enjoy. So, water board, as we are consumers, you have an obligation to supply the required quantity. But in the community, they themselves do the water. So that is the, anyway, I cannot give an answer how to get involved, but it is through the agencies. That is what we have to say. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Javed. Well, I think if there are any questions, please text in this chat box so that you can get cleared from Mr. Javed, who has been having a vast experience in water sector and donor-funded projects. So that's what. Then again, now I think there was a good picture you spoke about showed about the rainwater harvesting. But it so happened that I had the chance of going to Anamadua, where they had been having the rainwater harvesting investment made by the ADB in 1990s. But still, some of them have converted back to different alternative sources of water, which one they prefer to get the Bausa water or something like that. So there is another area where the natural resource, what they are using, or the technology what we are given to them, is continue to be used in addition to the other sources of water that they have been receiving. So I think with improvement, people go in for convenience. That's why there are a lot of people who like to go in for pipeline water.
Yeah. Due to climate change, the variation of, say, distribution of rainfall might increase dry areas in Sri Lanka and increase wet area, increase the intensity of water in the wet zone, dry zone becoming drier, wet zone becoming wetter. That is the scenario that we have to, that is how it is predicted. So therefore rainwater harvesting is also not feasible in some of the areas, but there is no rain. For about 7 months, how can they live?
All right. Well, if there are any other questions you all like to Mr. Javira? I guess, Mr. Javira, you have made everything clear to people, so that's what there are. I think coming through.
Actually, no, this is a philosophy. This is what we are. No, this is SDG has a lot of philosophical side and inspirational ideas. So when I first went through this thing, it was a very interesting subject for me at that time. Then I learned everything, and I became in fact a champion on this. So I helped the ministry to mainstream SDG in the national sector. Then we developed national targets, indicators, and we introduced those indicators in the national census, so that we can, during the next census, they gather the data in order to report safely managed water, safely managed sanitation. Before 2012 was the last census. Unfortunately, the next census was 2021, scheduled to 2021. Due to the pandemic, it has to be postponed. Now they are trying to do it this year. And in 2019, we had a workshop in September, national workshop, and agree on the questioning. So we have put proxy indicators in the questionnaire, about 13 proxy indicators. So once we get the data on that by the enumerators, we then transform that into the safely managed. We also introduce in other surveys like household income and health survey, household income and expenditure survey. In that, we introduce water quality testing on site. We introduced this membrane filtration system, I think brought by this UNICEF experts, Tom Slaymaker and Johnson. We had a workshop to introduce this for the enumerators of the Department of Census, how to do the membrane filtration and keep it for 12 hours to count the colonies, so that they can detect the E. coli. If the water is polluted, you can find out within 12 hours and record in the household income and expenditure survey. Part of water and sanitation is also part of that survey. It is done every 3 years, but that is done in samples and interpolate to national level. So now I think somebody must engage from the water board and the ministry on these subjects. Now, it all depends, everything depends on the government in power in Sri Lanka, unfortunately, because we don't have a system. Therefore, the government come and change the system. Therefore, there is no consistency. That's why I said inconsistent. So 3 I, in fact, 4 I's: inconsistent, incompetent, incapable, and illiterate government. I have to go into politics sometimes. Anyway, that is that.
Yeah, I think there's one little last question. I think again, it's talking on some long-term aspects of it. He says that several rural and community water supply projects are not functioning well and abandoned due to lack of maintenance and bearing of operational cost. As why the international agency are not to assist implement large-scale water supply scheme, then development will take place
So now,
automatically.
yes, now this EU project, we selected 65 locations in 4 districts, Madale, Badulla, Munragal and Nureli. All those are rehabilitation of the old system which are developed by the Community Water Supply and Sanitation project in 1990s. Now they need to treat water because most of the water was chlorinated and given. Now they need to treat water because of the environmental issues. And one of the key issues faced by them is that the tariff system that they are collected is not enough to pay the operator, not enough to buy a spare part, not enough to restore any breakdowns. So therefore, it has fallen apart and in need of funds. They are in need of funds. Therefore, they had to abandon their affordability reduce. They couldn't raise enough funds to. But we now have advised at least to recover cost for the maintenance people to get their salary and to replace at least for 5 years, you need to have maintenance cost, recover operation cost as well as maintenance cost plus some buffer, some security money for emergency operations, emergency breakdowns. That is why some other schemes they have abandoned because of the source depletion. Source pollution, source depletion, breakdowns, not enough revenue to sustainable management of the scheme.
Thanks very much, Mr. Javier, to have given something beyond thought that we need to carry about, especially you're talking about the sustainability as well as for the environmental aspects and many more, apart from as the duties of engineers on our side. So I think I will just hand it over back to Sri Haran to continue with the next
just
item.
one more request. Now I am really happy that there are 33 participants in this difficult situation. I really thank them. And also, when we prepare a report on this, we can put down the number of their names in the list of participants. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Javier, for your nice presentation and giving a lot of message into it. It's very good. And then Sri Haran, it's back to you for the next item in the next agenda.
Thank you very much, Engineer Ananda Javira, for this interesting presentation. And we learned a lot from this session. And I would like to thank Engineer Rajkumar for moderating this session very successfully. Now, I would like to call Engineer Tilini Kausalya, Secretary, Water Forum, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you very much, Engineer Srikaran. Good evening, dear ladies and gentlemen. It is my privilege to propose vote of thanks on this occasion as the Secretary of the Water Forum IESL. I, on behalf of the Water Forum, extend my gratitude to the speaker today, Engineer Ananda Javira, for sharing your valuable experience, knowledge, and opinion with us. Dear sir, it was an important and interesting presentation which helped us to learn a lot about challenges to achieve sustainable development goals and the importance of this blue gold. Further, I like to extend our acknowledgement to Engineer SGG Rajkumar, Executive Committee member of the Water Forum, for moderating this event successfully. I thank Engineer Bhadra Kamaladasa, Chairperson of the Water Forum, for organizing the event. I extend my gratitude to Engineer N. Srikaran, member of Water Forum, for your greatest efforts for comparing this event and make the event a success. I wish to express my gratitude to ISL Secretariat, especially Mr. Chamila and Mr. Chamara, for their efforts in making the event a success. At last but not least, I express our sincere thanks to all the participants who are with us today. I hope this lecture enlightened your understanding about sustainable development goals and challenges associated with that. Thank you all. We wish to meet you in future, this kind of another fruitful event, and wish a pleasant day. Good night.
Good night, everyone.